March 1962. Frank Sinatra's Palm Springs estate. Sinatra stood on his newly poured helipad, $100,000 of perfect concrete. He'd built it for President Kennedy. Guest cottages renovated, new phone lines installed with secure connections to Washington. A red carpet ordered for Air Force One. The President of the United States was coming to stay at his home. Then the phone rang. It was Peter Lawford, the President's brother-in-law, Sinatra's Rat Pack member. The voice on the line was shaking. "Frank, I need to tell you something about next weekend." What Peter said next would end the most powerful friendship in America, and Sinatra would never forgive the Kennedys. Ever. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the video for your support. Thank you for subscribing. To understand how the chairman became an enemy of Camelot, you have to go back 3 years, to 1960, to when Frank Sinatra believed he could change history. Sinatra was 44 years old in 1960. The comeback was complete. Oscar winner, chart topper, Vegas king. The collapse years were behind him. Ava still haunted him, yes, but publicly he was untouchable. The chairman of the board. And he'd decided to use that power for something bigger than records or movies. He was going to make John F. Kennedy president. The two men had met in the 1950s through Peter Lawford, who'd married into the Kennedy family. Sinatra saw something in the young senator from Massachusetts. Charm, ambition, that same hunger Sinatra recognized in himself. Kennedy saw something in Sinatra too. Access to money, Hollywood glamour, and connections that could deliver votes. But there was more. Sinatra genuinely believed in Kennedy. The working-class kid from Hoboken saw the young senator as America's future. Sophisticated, progressive, different from the older generation. Kennedy made Sinatra feel like he belonged at the table where power was really held. Not just entertainment power, real power. So Sinatra threw everything behind Kennedy's campaign. He organized fundraisers that pulled in millions. He produced and starred in campaign events across the country. He called in favors from every corner of Hollywood and Vegas. He even recorded a campaign song, High Hopes, with Kennedy-specific lyrics that became an anthem. And there was one more thing Sinatra did. Something he would never talk about publicly. Something that involved his other connections. The ones that didn't make it into campaign brochures. According to multiple accounts, Sinatra reached out to Sam Giancana, the Chicago mob boss who'd helped Sinatra in the past. The conversation, as witnesses later recalled hearing, went something like this. Kennedy needed to win Illinois and West Virginia. Giancana had influence in both states. Could he help? Years later, people who claimed to know would say that Giancana's organization delivered. Whether through union pressure, strategic donations, or other means, the votes came in. Illinois went for Kennedy by less than 9,000 votes. West Virginia, where Giancana reportedly poured money into the primary, swung Kennedy's way when polls had predicted otherwise. Kennedy won the presidency, and Sinatra felt like he'd helped build Camelot. The relationship between the two men seemed to deepen after the election. Kennedy stayed at Sinatra's Palm Springs compound. They partied together in Vegas. Sinatra organized the inaugural gala in January 1961, a star-studded event that raised money and showcased the glamorous new administration. Standing on that stage, Sinatra was at the center of American power. He wasn't just an entertainer anymore. He was a kingmaker, a presidential confidant. The distance from Hoboken to the White House, Sinatra had bridged it. But there was a problem. One that was growing in Washington while Sinatra was celebrating in Palm Springs. His name was Robert F. Kennedy. The president's younger brother had been appointed Attorney General, and Bobby Kennedy had a mission: destroy organized crime in America. He was going after the mob with unprecedented aggression. Indictments, investigations, deportations. The Kennedy administration's war on the mafia was relentless, and the mob bosses couldn't understand it. According to later accounts, Sam Giancana reportedly said words to this effect: "I helped get that guy elected. Now his brother's trying to put me in prison?" The confusion was genuine. To them, there had been a deal, an understanding. Sinatra found himself in an impossible position. He was friends with the president, but he was also connected, through decades of Vegas dealings, through favors given and received, to the same men Bobby Kennedy was targeting. The FBI had been watching Sinatra for years. By 1962, his file was thick. Surveillance photos showed him with known mob figures. Phone taps had caught conversations. The FBI knew about Cal Neva Lodge, Sinatra's Lake Tahoe casino, where Giancana was a hidden partner. They knew about the fundraisers, the Vegas parties, the calls made during the campaign. And Bobby Kennedy knew. As Attorney General, he had access to every FBI report. And what he saw convinced him of one thing: his brother, the President of the United States, needed to completely cut ties with Frank Sinatra. The political calculation was simple. The Kennedys needed to look tough on crime. They couldn't afford to be photographed with someone the FBI was actively investigating. Friendship was a luxury. The presidency was business. But how do you tell Frank Sinatra, the man who helped make you president, who organized your inaugural gala, who considered you a genuine friend, that the relationship is over? In February 1962, plans were being made for the president's trip to California in March. Kennedy was scheduled to spend the weekend in Palm Springs before heading to Los Angeles for official events. The original plan was for him to stay at Sinatra's compound, as he had before. When Sinatra heard the president was coming, he went into overdrive. He renovated guest cottages at his estate. He upgraded security. He installed new communication lines so Kennedy could run the country from Palm Springs if needed. And then came the piece de resistance, the helipad. $100,000 of concrete poured in the desert so Air Force One's helicopter could land directly at Sinatra's home. Sinatra wasn't just preparing for a presidential visit. He was building a Western White House. He told friends the president would use his home as a regular retreat. This wasn't just about one weekend. This was about cementing his place in history. As the helipad was being built, Sinatra walked the property with pride. The chairman had built an empire through talent and will. Now he was building something else, a permanent connection to power that no one could take away. But in Washington, Bobby Kennedy was making a different kind of plan. Everything was building toward one phone call. One conversation that would demolish friendship, power, and $100,000 of concrete. When loyalty would collide with politics, and Sinatra would learn that in the world of real power, he was still just the entertainment. The call came about a week before Kennedy's scheduled arrival. Peter Lawford was at his Malibu home when Bobby Kennedy contacted him with instructions. The president couldn't stay at Sinatra's compound. Security concerns, political optics, FBI warnings, the message needed to be delivered. And as Kennedy family, and as Sinatra's friend, Peter had to be the one to make the call. Peter Lawford later claimed he'd never dreaded anything more in his life. He picked up the phone, dialed the number, heard Sinatra's voice answer, upbeat, excited about the upcoming visit. According to accounts of those who knew both men, the conversation unfolded something like this. "Frank, I need to tell you something. About next weekend. What about it? Everything's ready. The cottages look great. You should see the helipad, Peter. It's perfect. There was a pause. Then Peter delivered the message. The president isn't staying with you. There's been a change of plans. Silence on the line. Then Sinatra's voice, different now. What do you mean, a change of plans? Peter explained as gently as he could. Security concerns. Secret Service recommendations. Political considerations. The president would be staying at Bing Crosby's house instead. The name landed like a bomb. Bing Crosby. A Republican. A man Sinatra considered beneath him professionally. After everything, the campaigning, the inaugural gala, the loyalty, the help given, Kennedy was choosing Bing Crosby's house over his. Those who knew Sinatra would later say they could imagine exactly what happened next. The ice-blue eyes going dead, the jaw clenching, the ring on his finger suddenly feeling heavy. According to reports, Sinatra's response was cold. Why? Peter tried to soften it, explained about the FBI concerns, the mob connections, Bobby Kennedy's investigation, but with each word, he could feel the friendship dying on the other end of the line. Sinatra reportedly said something to the effect of, "So the president believes the FBI over me. After everything I did. After everything." Peter tried to apologize. Tried to explain it wasn't personal, but they both knew the truth. It was completely personal. This was betrayal dressed up in politics. The call ended. No goodbye. Just the click of Sinatra hanging up. What happened next became legend in Palm Springs. Sinatra walked out to his newly built helipad. Some accounts say he was carrying a sledgehammer. Others say he grabbed a pickaxe from a tool shed. The staff who witnessed what followed would never forget it. Sinatra raised the sledgehammer and brought it down on the concrete. Then again. And again. For hours, he attacked the helipad he'd built for a president who would never land there. Swinging until his arms ached, until sweat soaked through his shirt, until $100,000 of perfect concrete was rubble. The staff watched from windows, knowing better than to approach. This wasn't just about a helipad. This was about a working-class kid from Hoboken who'd believed he'd finally made it to the table where real power sat. This was about discovering that to politicians, even to friends, he would always be just the entertainment. Useful, connected, but never equal. When Sinatra was finished, he went inside, made a phone call, told someone, different accounts claimed different recipients, that he would never speak to Peter Lawford again. Ever. And he meant it. The next day, photographs showing Sinatra with John F. Kennedy came down from the walls. Every picture, every memento from the campaign, the inaugural gala program, all of it. The president's visit to California proceeded as planned. Kennedy stayed at Bing Crosby's house in Palm Springs. The weekend was pleasant. Crosby was a gracious host. The president played golf, did his official events in Los Angeles, flew back to Washington. But something had shifted in Sinatra. The belief that his power extended beyond entertainment, that he truly belonged in the world of presidents and politics, died on that helipad, along with the concrete. And from that day on, Frank Sinatra's relationship with the Kennedy family was finished. Peter Lawford tried to reach out multiple times in the weeks after. Phone calls went unanswered, messages ignored. The Rat Pack, which had always included Peter, became impossible for him. Sinatra made it clear. Peter was out. Exiled. The friendship that had lasted over a decade ended because Peter delivered a message he didn't want to deliver. It was cruel. It was unfair. And it was absolutely Frank Sinatra. Betrayal to him was unforgivable. It didn't matter that Peter was just the messenger. He'd been part of it. That was enough. The irony twisted deeper. Sinatra had helped Kennedy partly through his mob connections. Now those same connections were the reason Kennedy cut him off. The very power Sinatra had used to build his empire, his ability to exist in both legitimate and illegitimate worlds, had become the thing that destroyed his presidential friendship. Sinatra never publicly spoke in detail about the betrayal. He was too proud for that. But those close to him saw the wound, saw how it festered alongside the older wound from Ava, another person who'd left him, another loss he couldn't control. Bobby Kennedy's war on organized crime continued. The FBI pressure on Sinatra increased. In 1963, his hidden ownership stake in Cal Neva Lodge, the one with Sam Giancana, would be exposed, forcing Sinatra to surrender his Nevada gaming license. The mob connections that Bobby Kennedy had warned his brother about came back to haunt Sinatra in concrete ways. But the political friendship was already dead. It had died in a phone call, in the rubble of a helipad, in the cold realization that loyalty to politicians was always transactional. Years later, after President Kennedy was assassinated in November 1963, people wondered if Sinatra felt anything. Regret, forgiveness, a softening of the anger. Those close to him said he did feel something, but it was complicated. Grief mixed with bitterness, sympathy tangled with unhealed betrayal. He'd lost a friend, but he'd lost that friend before Dallas. He'd lost him in Palm Springs in March 1962 when politics proved stronger than loyalty. As for Peter Lawford, the exile lasted 22 years. From 1962 until Peter's death in 1984, Sinatra refused to speak to him, refused to work with him, removed him from Rat Pack history as much as possible. Friends tried to broker reconciliation. Peter tried to apologize, but Sinatra was unmovable. Some betrayals in Sinatra's world were permanent. And from that day in March 1962 on, Sinatra understood something he'd refused to believe before. He could command Vegas, control Hollywood, dominate music, but real political power would always see him as something less. A useful connection, a risk to be managed, never an equal. The Helipad story became legend. The image of Sinatra destroying $100,000 of concrete with a sledgehammer captured something essential about him. The rage, the pride, the refusal to accept humiliation quietly. Some men would have called the president and tried to smooth things over. Sinatra destroyed the evidence of his hope. He lived 36 more years after that phone call, won more awards, made more records, became an even bigger legend. But that particular wound, the one that said he'd never truly belong in the world of presidents and power, never fully healed. The chairman could rule his empire, but there were rooms he'd never be allowed to enter. And the knowledge of that exclusion, dressed up as friendship, then snatched away, stayed with him. Another scar, another reminder that no matter how far you climbed from Hoboken, some people would always see where you came from, and who you knew, and what you'd done to get there. The concrete rubble was cleared away. The guest cottages remained, unused by presidents. And Frank Sinatra learned what many had learned before him. In politics, there are no permanent friends, only permanent interests. The cost of power, it turned out, was the illusion of friendship. And Sinatra paid it in full, in concrete, in trust. In the cold blue rage of a man who'd believed he'd finally made it to the table, only to discover he'd always just been the entertainment.